Hello, and welcome to Spot's inaugural Drive event. Today, we're going to be talking to you about cargo theft awareness. My name is Andrew Krop. I'm the CFO at Spot Freight, joined today by Craig Hunter, our VP of Operations. We thank you for joining today's webinar. We look forward to bringing you some insights on trends that we're unfortunately seeing in the cargo theft side of the world. Also talk to you about some best practices for shippers to try to prevent this unfortunate incident from occurring. To look at today's agenda in a little more detail, first we will cover cargo theft trends that we're seeing out in the market today. We'll talk about some common tactics that we see employed by these bad actors. Then we'll turn to some recommended shipper guidelines where we can help you identify ways that you can improve the likelihood of avoiding these kinds of situations, best practices to employ at your facilities. And then lastly, we'll talk through what to do in the unfortunate event that a loss occurs, the action steps that you should be taking in conjunction with your transportation partners to identify these issues and then quickly reach resolution. So to get us started, we'll talk a little bit about some of the cargo theft trends that we're seeing. So on this slide that we're presenting, you can see data from CargoNet, a very well-respected industry player. They're showing the cargo theft activity by year going back to 2022. You can see about 1,900 incidents a few years ago has quickly grown to 3,600, nearly a doubling in this period of time. Cargo theft has, again, been a very prevalent issue. We continue to see it frequently throughout the industry. Looking next at where does cargo theft typically happen? California, Texas, Illinois are by far the largest jurisdictions for these types of events to occur. Maybe not a surprise, particular in California, with the amount of activity that flows through the ports, import activity. We know that some of those commodities can be higher value and really present a high risk item. In terms of the facility locations where cargo thefts occur, on the next slide we see warehouses and DCs are the largest location. So really more than half of the activity happens at the shipper, which really highlights the importance of having good procedures in place to prevent events from happening at the pickup. When you've got a fraudulent carrier or a fictitious operator, it's really paramount that we're identifying those individuals at that warehouse location. You can see throughout the rest of the chart, about 50% of the other events happen either in transit or after they've left the shipper location. So really having security over the road is very important, as well as at the shipper location. Lastly, turning to the different types of commodities that are targeted by these operators, you can see on the left-hand side, food and beverage, household goods, electronics are the three largest targeted commodities. These can be oftentimes easily resold or sent, out of the country to wherever the bad actors are taking these stolen products. With that, I'll turn it over at this point to Craig. Craig's going to walk us through some fraudulent tactics and real life examples that we've seen in this side.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And as Andrew mentioned, a lot of these instances are happening in California at the shipper, with essentially the truckloads going missing as soon as they picked up. It's usually I think in general we would think of cargo theft, and we would think of, like in the movies, of a truck being hijacked and things of that nature, but that's not typically the case. Typically it is from a carrier coming in with the intent to take the freight to a location that is not actually on the BOL. So we're going to talk through a couple of some of the biggest ways that this is happening, and we'll get into, as Andrew mentioned, some tips and some just some guidelines for shippers. If you are watching this and you manage a shipping facility, or you're in control of the check-in process and the pickup process, you should learn a lot from this. But also, if you're a customer that has vendor routed freight where they're bringing it to you, you may not know if a truckload has gone missing. More so, it just doesn't show up and you have to reorder. Again, we're just going to walk through some of these common tactics and some things to look out for. So the first one is carrier impersonation. The biggest thing we see here is that a trucking company will show up and they'll have either a paper a paper placard on the side of their truck or a magnet or something like that to conceal the identity of the actual truck, the actual trucking company and whose actual authority that truck is registered to that's coming in to pick up. So as a shipper, when you're doing your check-in process, it's important to go out and physically look at the truck and make sure that it's not some piece of paper taped to the side of the truck. Make sure that the name that's on the side of the truck matches the name that the carrier actually checks in with. We've seen instances where the driver will be told by a fraudulent individual that they need to check in as trucking company 1234. And they'll go and do that because they think they're just doing what they're told, and the shipper doesn't actually go out and verify what name is on the actual side of the truck. Another big issue with carrier impersonation is that the contact information that's being collected at the time of pickup isn't verified or isn't called when the driver is there actually picking up the load. So if a driver gives you a phone number at the check-in process, one simple step: call that number, see if their phone rings. If they've got, if they say, I don't have my phone on me, ask them to go back out, get their phone, call the number, and then ask them to call you back and make sure all the numbers match up. A second instance that we're seeing, and this is really on the receiving side, as you all know, as we receive goods, and especially at a facility that is receiving products subject to count. The industry has made many advancements over the years, but we're still heavily reliant on a piece of paper to say what was loaded on this truck at the shipper and what should be there at the receiver. So with AI and different technology today, it's very easy for bad actors to come in and modify paperwork while it's in transit. So then the receiver, the shipper ships 60 pallets and the receiver receives 30, but the BOLs say 30 because they've been modified in transit, so the receiver thinks that they received the shipment in full. And then it usually takes anywhere from 30, 90 to 180 days based on payment terms and everything like that as the receivers go to reconcile their inventory and pay for the goods that they've received before it comes out. And in that time frame, there's many more shipments that can be impacted by this. So,
Craig, do you want to talk for just a minute on when those bad actors have an instance like this? They're taking that trailer and disassembling the door unit so that they can go in and pilfer the pallets, right? And leaving the seal intact in the process.
Yeah. So this is a shipper guideline too, right? The things to check for are the actual bolts on the trailer doors. They should all be flush and facing inward. If the bolts are facing outward, with where the stem of the bolts facing out and the nuts on the side of the doors where you can see it when the doors are closed, they can very easily take off the trailer door mechanism and keep the seal intact, open the doors, go through the freight, see what it is, take some pallets out, and then they know exactly how to modify the bills to show that it was, it's
match
arriving.
The pallet count and the case count on the trailer.
And your seal number on your BOL will match what's on the trailer because they just took the locking mechanism off. Another thing on that note is to look at the trailer numbers at the shipper as well. Like if it's something that could be easily, it slide in the trailer numbers to number them. Again, pick up on that. Look at how the bolts are placed on the trailer as well, and take photos of the freight once it's loaded in the trailer. Take photos of the license plate of the trailer, the license plate of the truck, or the tractor, and then the sides of the tractor and everything like that to make sure all of that stuff matches when it arrives at the receiver.
Right.
Blind shipments are a legitimate thing in our industry where the shipper may think it's going to Indianapolis, but it's actually going to Philadelphia or something like that. There is a legitimate use case for blind shipments, but it's important to understand as a shipper that you need to understand, hey, is this a blind shipment, or is this like, even if your customer doesn't necessarily want you to know where it's ultimately going to end up, still think it's important to call out that the address on the BOL is where the freight is intended to be. It is not a blind shipment, and you can ask the driver as well when they check in, where are you taking this? Where, what have you been given instructions to take this freight anywhere else other than the address that's on the BOL?
Yeah. And I think that also gets to the importance of communication, right? In a situation like that, if the shipper is working with a 3PL or a broker partner or someone like that, and there is a difference in expected delivery location or things like that, I think our advice would be, as soon as possible, get in touch with that broker or whoever's handling that load and just let them know of the discrepancy. They may have some information that indicates that this is correct, but it also could be a really large red flag and an opportunity to catch something before a bad act occurs.
Yeah, exactly. Contact information changes. We put this in here, and this is more so from some of the things that we're monitoring as a brokerage. But there are many tools out there that allow for easy monitoring of, did this trucking company just recently change their primary point of contact? Did they change the email address? Did they change the phone number that's associated with the trucking company? Are they related to other trucking companies, etc.? We're monitoring that, but it's a red flag, and it's with any of these things, as the industry starts to pick up on them and we start to monitor them, then we'll see instances happen where somebody will purchase an MC from an individual that maybe their authority went into pending status, they're up for insurance renewal, and with sometimes in market conditions can drive this as well. If that owner operator was struggling and they decided, I'm just going to go back and I'm going to drive for another company, I'm going to let my authority expire. We'll see those authorities change hands, and in a lot of cases, part of that fake bill of sale will include, give me the login to your email address associated with this company, or the cell phone, etc. In most cases, if it's owner op, they should have it should be their personal cell phone that's registered, so we should still be able to pick up on a cell phone change. But if you come across trucking companies that have recently changed hands or they've recently sold, I think we really, as an industry, need to put those companies on the shelf for a little while just to see how everything shakes out with that sale. We'll also notice some insurance. If there's a lot of insurance changes in recent months, it could be another red flag. They're either paying month to month, or they are switching from one insurance company to another and maybe stating that they've got more or less trucks than they actually have, etc.
Yeah, a lot of red flags that can be identified in terms of the carriers. Their contact information, their authority changes, all those things that really need to be monitored in terms of vetting who that carrier actually is.
And a lot of this stuff, I think, and we'll get into this, is some important tactics for shippers and for customers alike. But a lot of this comes down to how is if you're working with a brokerage, how is the brokerage monitoring this, in their system? Because there could be a delay, up to 10, 15 days from when the information is changed before some of these third-party systems flag it. So, it's important that you understand how your brokerages are monitoring this and how they are, what their process is for contact information changes. There's another topic that we'll talk about, which is called a fictitious pickup. You may have heard this term. You may have seen it thrown around. This essentially is where someone will impersonate a motor carrier, and they will get load details from a brokerage or from a shipper or from a customer, and then they will turn around and they'll impersonate a brokerage, and they will hire an unsuspecting legitimate trucking company to go in and pick up the shipment. They'll tell them it's a blind shipment. They'll offer, in a lot of cases, they'll offer to pay them via, Quick Pay or Zelle or something like that, which they may offer a little bit over market rate as well. And if a owner op or a smaller trucking company is struggling, they may turn a blind eye to the fact that their factoring company won't factor them, and they may see it as an opportunity to make a little bit more money because their factoring company won't take a percentage out. So, but basically, once that unsuspecting carrier goes into the shipper, they're going to go and pick up the load, and then they're going to take it to a different destination other than where it was intended to. We see a lot of these pick up and go out to some crossdocks in California. We've seen some hit into Indianapolis, and Arizona as well seems to be on the rise, where the freight will be going from Texas to Pennsylvania, but they will reroute it to go to Arizona. It'll get cross-docked. The carrier will claim that they have had a breakdown, and they'll string this process along long enough for them to get the freight in and out of a cross-dock to another cross-dock, and then eventually they'll break it out into smaller trucks or even personal vehicles. And then the last piece of this is double brokering. And as we looked at that first slide on the trends, where we went from a fairly low number in 2022 up to a huge increase into 2024, I would say 22 and prior, our two biggest issues from fraud in this industry were double brokering and fuel advance scam, where somebody fakes a BOL, they send it, they never actually pick up the load, and they get a portion of the line haul in the form of a fuel advance. But the other piece of double brokering is there's two cases here. There's a double brokering that's a portion of the fictitious pickup, and then the cargo never arrives where it's intended to. Then there's also double brokering where the cargo does arrive, but the carrier that actually picked up the load and delivered it never receives payment for the work that they did. And so then you'll have carriers that will start reaching out to the shipper to try to figure out who the actual broker was on the load, or they'll reach out to the receiver and they'll demand payment, which can create a headache. So best case scenario, the freight delivers, and you have to figure out, it could be a double pay scenario from a freight charges standpoint. But worst case, there's probably two worst case scenarios. Number one, the freight doesn't arrive, and the second being that this other carrier that's hired probably doesn't meet the same safety standards and operating authority standards that the original carrier that was hired meets. So if you're a shipper or receiver or a customer, and you're working with asset-based providers, and you should really make sure that you have it called out in your contracts that that the brokering is prohibited, or if you are going to allow an asset-based provider to broker, make sure that you know when they are brokering and when they are not. So you should have a separate SCAC code or a separate tender method to reach their brokerage division, so you're aware of when they're brokering. And doing some checks on the receiving end too, of as far as I put John's Trucking on this load, they're not allowed to broker. Why did Brian's Trucking deliver it, etc.
And I think that really feeds into turning the conversation a little bit to shipper practices. It really feeds into the first of the three stages of cargo theft prevention that we talk about. So that's the carrier validation piece, right? So in this regard, as Craig referenced in some of his real life examples, it's really all of those systems that need to be monitored to identify, has a carrier changed hands? Has the authority been sold? What is this carrier's safety record? What does their insurance look like? So really, 3PLs, brokers have a huge role in this carrier validation stage in ensuring that we've got a legitimate carrier that's been assigned to the load and is going to pick it up. The second stage, at pickup, we'll dive into a little bit further on the next couple of slides. But really, that's the stage at which shippers and receivers have a very important role and steps that they can take to try to mitigate these theft losses before they happen. And then lastly, the most critical stage here, while in transit, just the tracking, the monitoring, the quick response. Those are also critical in the event that something may be going wrong with the load. I guess, Craig, any comments to add to this?
Yeah, I think there's with these three key stages, there's also there's kind of an all-encompassing fourth piece of this, which is communication, right? The communication between broker and shipper and customer, etc., is critical in this process. 5-6 years ago, um, there was a lot of concern as a brokerage with sharing with the shipper who the actual trucking company is that's going to be coming in to pick up the load. In today's environment, it's critical to open up those lines of communication between the shipper and the brokerage to say, all right, who is the trucking company that's coming in to pick this up? Collect information about the driver, the driver's license, the name, phone numbers, etc., and make sure all of this stuff matches when they arrive. Again, this part of this is the communication between the shipper and the broker, and then which again the shipper is very reliant on the broker to send in who they are saying that they're going to send in, and the broker needs to do their due diligence to make that happen. But kind of that next line of defense is, the shippers on site at that facility, they need to help and be willing to go out, look, check, walk around the vehicle, make sure it's not a temporary tag or something like that. Look for any red flags between the information the broker provided versus the information that the carrier is giving that's actually there to pick up the load. And I think you need to know, as a shipper and as a customer, you need to understand in working with any brokerage what their carrier validation steps are, right? What are the different data sources that they're using to track things like contact change information? How are they allowing people to get into their platform? And a critical thing is, how are they actually sending the load details to the motor carrier? We've seen more and more, an uptick in motor carriers' legitimate email addresses being compromised. Right? They'll get an email from somebody posing as the DOT that says you need to update your registration or you're going to be put out of service. And so they go and sign in, and they sign in with their email. They click a link from their email address, and all of a sudden their email has been compromised. And somebody can sit and kind of lie in wait in that email inbox. They can communicate with people and easily set up a rule to automatically delete any replies before they get delivered, or things like that. So one of the critical things is to have pertinent load details hidden behind some form of multi-factor authentication. Right? I think, unfortunately, even though it's quicker, the days of emailing a rate confirmation to a motor carrier really should be gone. We really need to understand how those pertinent load details are getting delivered to the motor carrier, how brokers are vetting the motor carrier, and we need to open up the lines of communication between the shipping facility and the brokerage. And then once that truck arrives, as a shipper, your check-in process is critical in not only making sure that everything matches with the information that you were given, but also in the event that something doesn't arrive as intended, the more information that you've collected on the front end, the easier it is to recover and locate the freight before it's gone. And I think a lot of this could come back to, and we talked about food and beverage is a big one. Obviously, electronics are a big one. Anything that's serialized, having that manifest with that pickup file, not necessarily given to the carrier, but at least ready if needed to be able to provide that, so that the necessary parties can report those serial numbers as stolen as soon as it's realized that the freight may be missing.
Craig, why don't we flip over real quick and talk through guidelines for shippers and some of the key steps that they can be taking?
Yeah, and in this next slide, I'll come back to this. in transit piece as well as part of these guidelines too. This really, like, we've talked about a lot, and a lot of this stuff is gonna play back into some of the things that we spoke in the last couple of slides. But again, that communication piece, brokers and shippers working together to verify the carrier information, share photos, make sure the photos match. Um, it's not as even at things that are off as, yeah, it's truck 123 and truck 56 shows up or something like that, right? Just sharing as much information ahead of time between the broker and the shipper is a critical piece in this. And then again, the shipper, when that truck arrives, make sure all that information matches. Don't rely on a self-filled out sheet from the driver. Actually, go out, look at have the guard check armed with that information at the time of check-in, or have the load planner, et cetera, who's there to assign a dock door, give them that, make sure that they're armed with that information and that they feel empowered to push back and communicate back with the broker if they need to turn the truck away. And I mentioned earlier, don't pre-print BOLs, and make sure that we're actually writing the name of the carrier, not the name given, right? The name of the actual motor carrier on the BOLs. We see oftentimes as a brokerage, we see that the broker is listed as the carrier on the BOL. That's got many negative. There's many negative parts to that, but the biggest thing is, it's if that freight ends up in the wrong warehouse somewhere and it's got the paperwork sitting on there, it's going to be hard for law enforcement to figure out who to actually contact with if they don't have the right information, or they may not trust the broker because the broker's listed as the carrier and they may think that the broker's in on it. So have the carrier name. If you've got space on the BOL, put contact information for the brokerage as well. Put contact information right there on the BOL and on that paperwork, so it can be used if someone is able to recover this freight. I mentioned earlier the driver calling back to the shipper when they're standing there at check-in, right? Have your phone, call, make sure the numbers match up, make sure that, ask them, what trucking company do you work for? Not, and are you leased on to anybody, or look for any kind of strange red flags. Has someone told you to check in as a trucking company that you don't actually work for? I mean, that could be a critical question in catching some of this. And then once I've seen a lot of best practices, a lot of shippers that will do this once the load is once the truck's loaded, they'll send back a loading confirmation that has the BOL, it has the photos of the freight inside of the truck, photos of the trailer with the seal on, photos of the side of the truck, the truck plates, copy of the driver's license, etc. And that protects in two ways, right? That protects us from the BOL modification, because we can look and see how many pallets are loaded, and then we can cross-check that once we've received the POD, or talk to the receiver and say, hey, there's 60 pallets that are headed your way. Well, please let us know if anything from that is differing, or if anything differs from what's listed on this pickup BOL. There are some ways to automate this through EDI with advanced shipment notices. If you can implement that between your ship point and your receive point, that's another layer of double checking the information that you get, and that can help you with this issue of BOL modification. Again, the multiple sides of the truck have security cameras, but again, I would encourage you. It's nice to have a security camera that can see that truck hit a car in your parking lot, right? But you really need to have the next level of that is something that shows that truck as it pulls in and captures all the information on the side of it, or take photos of that truck before it departs your facility, so we can make sure that everything lines up when it arrives. And again, kind of along the lines with having the driver call you and asking them, who do they work for? Has anybody told them to check in as anyone else? Reconfirm with the driver that their intent is to deliver to the address that's listed on the BOL, and let them know, educate them, let them know there's a lot of fictitious pickups going on right now. Somebody may be telling you it's a blind shipment, and you could be liable essentially for cargo theft if you deliver this somewhere else that's not indicated on the BOL. I would rather have shippers say that and have me have to deal with the lower instances of a legitimate blind shipment than have it the other way where the shipper's not asking these questions and paying attention to these things and asking this of the drivers. And the last piece kind of goes into our third stage of the theft prevention, which is the in-transit monitoring and in-transit location alerts. So we have the great thing about our industry is we have a multitude of ways to track where this truck is. But when that's really strong is when we use more than one location-based tracking system at once. So we can use an app on the driver's phone. We can also connect with the ELD, and then we can leverage that with placing GPS tracking devices actually inside of the trailers. Then we can monitor for any fringe cases or any outliers where all of a sudden the driver's tracking on the right path, but the trailer is tracking somewhere else, or that GPS tracker is tracking somewhere else. We lost signal to it. Some of those things that can tip us off while that shipment is still in transit versus figuring it out a week later when the load doesn't arrive.
Yeah, and they even have things like light sensors, right? If the trailer doors have been breached, and, things have been tampered with.
Yeah, so they'll have sensors in there. You place it on like the last pallet or place it against the trailer wall, and it'll check to see. It checks mile per hour. It checks for shock. It can check humidity. It can monitor temperature, and it can also look at Krop, as Andrew mentioned. It can also look at light detection, and it give an alert. There's sometimes where you'll have just light leaking through the trailer as it drives down, on a real sunny day, but they have thresholds as well, so you can get severe light alerts where it's okay now, and now we got the location saying it's actually at a truck stop, and there's a light alert, so we can get law enforcement out quickly to tell them that we believe that there's a cargo theft in progress.
Yeah, I guess Craig, here to wrap us up quickly. We want to take a couple minutes just to talk about immediate action steps that shippers or others should take in the event they think a loss has occurred or there's an at-risk situation.
Yeah. So I think we'll go through the information that's on this slide, but the biggest piece in this, and again, I go back to the communication, but it's the speed of the communication. If you're drawing a hard line in the sand that says, if there's any indication that we think one of our loads are stolen, you're out of the network. Really what that's going to do is you're going to impede that communication, right? A good relationship between a shipper, customer, and a broker is an open line of communication to say, hey, let's check this. There's something off on this shipment. Let's check this. The quicker that we can do that, the quicker that we can take these steps once we've realized that a loss has occurred. So immediately, once we suspect that a loss has occurred, we're going to have to file a police report will need to be filed, and that police report is going to need to be filed where the freight picked up from. Even with tracking information, etc., that's the last known location confirmed that the freight was, and that motor carrier was with the freight. So we're going to have to file a police report in the jurisdiction where that shipping facility is. What that means is there's some law enforcement that will allow a brokerage to make a report over the phone, but there are many out there that still require a report to be given and taken by an officer that's physically on site at that shipping facility. So we're going to have a plan and a point of contact in the event that a loss does occur. That point of contact on site at the shipping facility can help assist and facilitate the creation of the police report. Just as a general example, even if you know that the freight moved through a cross dock at this location 2 days ago, and you want to get law enforcement out there to just check that cross dock and see if it's still there, you still have to have that police report filed, and you have to have that product, the cargo, reported as stolen from the jurisdiction where that cargo picked up from. So the law enforcement where you think it is, or where the last known location that you've been able to figure out, they can then use that to go out to that facility to check to see if the product is still there. We mentioned the getting we opened up this discussion with some data from CargoNet. It's free to file a report on CargoNet. So even as a shipper, if you're not a member of CargoNet, you can still file it. We leverage the CargoNet suite of tools heavily, not only from a reporting standpoint, but we also get information when losses are reported. And there's probably a 2.5 on this section that is reported. There's a lot of pride. There's a lot of pride in the industry. It could be two weeks removed, and you think there's no hope in getting the cargo back. Those numbers are escalating, but those aren't the real numbers. A lot of this goes unreported, and so a big key in this is reporting it with CargoNet or reporting it with law enforcement, so we can get any of those items actually officially reported as stolen, and then places like pawn shops and things like that can be on the lookout and be monitoring for any of those serial numbers, et cetera, coming through. And again, when we file that police report, we're going to need to know driver's license information of who picked it up, the plates, the more information that's recorded at the time of pickup is going to help in that police report, and it's going to help law enforcement, right? It could be a jurisdiction that's not familiar with it. So the more information that we can provide them in the least amount of time is really going to help move that report along.
Yeah, speed is really key on this, right? Speed and communication, I think, is how you would sum it all up.
Yeah, and like my example on the cameras, right? If it's a large facility, there's going to be some involvement from asset protection or loss prevention or security or IT. There's going to be some other party that you're going to have to rely on to get the camera footage, and then that camera footage has to be sent, etc. But if you record all this stuff at the beginning of the process and you send that loaded confirmation with all this information on there, that's going to speed it up exponentially.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Craig. A lot of great insights here today. Hopefully the audience found this useful in terms of getting up to speed or more well-informed on the trends in the industry, as well as action steps that they can be taking. Again, thank you for your time. This is the first of several drive events that Spot will be hosting over the next several months here, really in an effort to best connect with shippers and other parties in the transportation world and bring them engaging content. If you have any questions about today's content or any other freight-related items, please don't hesitate to reach out to your Spot representative. Thanks again for joining, everybody.